Hello, my name is Mskindness Ramirez, and I am an author, an educator, and a cannabis entrepreneur. Today, I will be having a talk with you about how to have the cannabis conversation with your children. This will be your Canna Parent's Guide to using the right words at the right time. I'd like to thank you for joining me today and tell you a little bit more about myself. I am the founder and CEO of Club Kindness. We are a membership association committed to normalizing cannabis use through direct-to-consumer education and responsible brand messaging. Our mission is to educate families, foster connections, and help sustain community for real social change and cannabis reform. First and foremost, I am an educator. And so I'm really good at fostering conversations among parents and their children. Today's talk will include 4 areas for discussion. First, we'll do a reflective analysis. We'll talk about how it starts at home and how we ourselves, as parents, see the cannabis plant. We'll look at the parent perspective framework. This helps us to identify what type of Canna mom or Canna dad are we. And we'll also talk about the stages of development. We'll look at some conversation norms at each stage in relation to what your child may be going through. And finally, I'll leave you with resources for application. I'll give you 3 books that I love that are great guides for helping you have that conversation with your children. The reflective analysis process is the first and most important step in beginning the conversation with your kids around cannabis, because everything starts with self. It is here that we begin to think about our values around cannabis, our lifestyle and family needs, and our intentions. What type of communication goals are we going to set for this talk? And here is where we consider any personal shame that we may be experiencing. Managing personal shame is the number one thing I help parents overcome. Because typically, we have been miseducated in our youth. We are using cannabis for reasons that we've heard are wrong, are bad. And so when we think about having that conversation with our children, it produces anxiety based on our own personal shame. So it's really important to do this reflective analysis process. Ask yourself, what do you hope to gain from this conversation? What are your goals going into it? And what do you really want your child to know about cannabis? The parent perspective framework is an important step in determining what type of Canna parent you are. There are 3 types of perspectives that Canna parents typically come from. Let's see which Canna parent you are. The first type of Canna parent sees cannabis as a drug. This parent uses cannabis, but might still compare it to other illicit substances. The second Canna parent perspective is the parent who sees cannabis as medicine. This parent uses it with the intention of healing and may compare it to other pharma or nutraceuticals. The third and final perspective that Canna parents come from is seeing cannabis as essential. This parent sees cannabis as medicine, as natural, as healing, and as absolutely necessary to their health and wellness practice. Now let's talk about the stages of development. For this talk, we'll look at 6 stages of development. First, with in vitro. This is the stage where you are really having the conversation with yourself. You're thinking about the child that's coming. You're wondering how you might integrate cannabis into your life after the little one arrives. And you're thinking about how to protect them from all the things in the world. It's an important stage because it's the first step in you beginning to think about how you're going to talk with your child about cannabis. The second stage is 0 to 4. This is when our children are forming language. I call this the language formation stage. Here, in infancy to early childhood, is when your children are learning trust or mistrust. They're learning autonomy or shame. And they're learning to take initiative over guilt. All of us want what's best for our children. And in this stage, if we are consuming cannabis, it's important that we show them healthy and responsible behaviors. A toddler who is just developing language skills has no emotional connection to the cannabis plant. So when we feel shame about our own personal consumption and then subsequently hide our use, the only thing we are teaching a child at this stage of development is how to be dishonest and how to lie. As we move into the third stage, this is the system navigation stage. Here, your 5 to 10-year-old is now school-aged. We are learning industry or inferiority and how to really find their confidence. Now, they're navigating schooling systems. They're beginning to receive information from outside sources. At this stage, it's important that you speak clearly and candidly about cannabis, the plant, how it can be used, and prepare them for some of the miseducation that they might receive from these agencies. Here, we might use more scientific terms. We'll begin calling it cannabis. We'll explain the various applications. But we'll talk about it to our 5 to 10-year-old as something that we honor and value, but be matter of fact about the reality. As we move up the ladder in the stages of development, we enter puberty. This is the 11 to 16-year-old. This child is in adolescence. They are learning identity or role confusion. So this stage is really, really important. Here's where your child has probably already experienced cannabis in some way or another. They've smelled it, they know about it, they've heard about it in school. And if you started talking in the last stage and earlier stages, they have a pretty healthy relationship and understanding of the plant from their home life. This student, this child, is still managing the outside system. They are still receiving messages, and now probably even stronger messages against cannabis. So it's really important that in this stage, you have regular conversations. Ask them about their curiosity around the plant. Talk with them about what their friends or what may be happening in their community and their social circle, and use proper terminology. Know the difference between THC and CBD. Be able to talk with them and answer any questions they might have about biology. And a great way to have conversations with this stage of development student or child is by comparing it to other things they are already learning. For example, most children at this stage have entered science, biology classes. They are now talking about things like the circulatory system and the respiratory system. So it's a perfect opportunity for you to explain how cannabis actually works in the body and how the endocannabinoid system is similar to those other systems. Next is 17 to 24. This is a personal choice stage, young adulthood. They're learning intimacy versus isolation and how to have responsible relationships, really. At this point, around 18, they're legal in the United States. They can choose to purchase cannabis in most states now at that age. You've already been showing them what ethical consumption looks like. You've already been having open and candid conversations. Now, you're talking with your young adult about how they're going to continue to cultivate a future of ethical consumption. Try not to overthink it. It's a plant. Hot smoke is bad for the developing brain. So up until this stage, you are discouraging smoking or vaporizing or any combustion, but you are explaining why. And while you may not be encouraging the use of cannabis, you are open to having conversations with your young adults about how they might incorporate it into their lives. And then finally, they fly the coop, right? Over 25, frontal lobe is fully developed. Now, you may be consuming cannabis along with your child. This is an opportunity for you to ensure that they are ethically consuming. Talk with them about how cannabis makes them feel, why they use it. Ask those questions and share your own experiences to foster that connection. Now, as promised, I'm going to leave you with a few resources to help you navigate these conversations with your families, your children, and communities. And we're going to start with the children's book that I actually wrote to help spark those Canna conversations. This is the Root family's Very Special Garden. It's a story that's loosely based on my own family, and it really is geared toward the 8 to 12-year-old. It introduces important vocabulary like endocannabinoid system, trichomes, the difference between THC and CBD, and it's a fun book. There is no smoking in the book. The family is growing a garden with all of the things they need to achieve homeostasis, including the inclusion of companion plants. So check that out, the Root family's Very Special Garden. The second resource that I love is Weed Mom. Okay, Weed Mom is the Canna Mom's or the Canna Curious's guide to how to integrate cannabis into a healthier, more relaxed, and happier parenting. This is a great book by my friend, Danielle Simone Brand. And all you Canna moms, check this out. And finally, because it's really important to be informed, how can you have these conversations with your children if you aren't armed with the right factual information about cannabis? My go-to guide for anything scientific or cannabis health related is the Cannabis Health Index. This book I'll call the DSM of cannabis. It's a must-have on your bookshelf if you have questions about the plant, the biology, how it works in the body, medical cannabis, and mindfulness techniques. I hope you'll check out those books, and I hope you'll continue to learn for yourself as you have these conversations with your children. I want to thank you again for spending this time with me today. I want to thank you for being bold, for being a Canna parent, for being willing to engage in dialogue with your children. I want to thank you for being a part of the movement to cultivate a future of ethical consumption. I want to invite you to reach out to me if you have additional questions. Feel free to book a free consultation at clubkindness.org. And finally, I want to thank Americans for Safe Access for this Unity Conference and for all of the work that you are doing to normalize cannabis. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.